Hello and welcome to CNBC Meets. I'm Tania Bryer, and in recognition of World Cancer Day 2022, I meet the actress, businesswoman and philanthropist, Elizabeth Hurley. She's a star of the silver screen, television, and of course a great many magazine covers. But away from the bright lights and red carpets, Elizabeth Hurley is a tireless campaigner for breast cancer awareness. She's had an active role in the Estee Lauder company's breast cancer campaign for the past 27 years. The campaign looks to unite people in its mission to create a breast cancer-free world. It was founded by the late Evelyn Lauder back in 1992 with the launch of the now seminal awareness symbol, the pink ribbon. Elizabeth Hurley, thank you so much for joining me ahead of World Cancer Day. Where do you think we are in terms of cancer treatments?
Well, I think because of the pandemic, because of the last 18 months, it's been very hard for some of us to think about any health issues apart from COVID. Obviously, we've all been worried about getting vaccine. We've been worried about keeping our loved ones safe. Some of us have lost people. It's been a really challenging time for everyone, but it's been an incredibly challenging time for people who've been diagnosed with cancer or for people who are worried about their own health and would like to be checked for cancer-related illnesses. So if anything, this World Cancer Day this year in 2022 is more vital than it's ever been.
What do you think can be done to reassure cancer patients and actually make them the priority?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Estee Lauder company's breast cancer campaign. And so breast cancer is the cancer that's right at the front of my mind today, this World Cancer Day. So what we'd like to say to women, and indeed men, because also men can be diagnosed with breast cancer, is that breast cancer is now the most diagnosed cancer in the world. It's overtaken lung cancer. It is the most diagnosed cancer. So it's obviously something that people really, really need to pay attention to. And so what we would say to women on this World Cancer Day is think about your breast health. When did you last go to your doctor for a mammogram? When did you last self-check? Because we truly believe that self-checking is one of the most important things women can do to look after their own breast health. So we'd like to discuss those things that on this World Cancer Day, people really, really pay attention to.
And this October actually marks the 30th anniversary of the Estee Lauder company's breast cancer campaign. What do you think has changed over the years? You've been an ambassador with them for more than 20 years. What changes have you seen?
So I'm in my 27th year of going around the world talking about breast cancer, very much so in October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Day, but also really 365 days of the year, because of course breast cancer is always with us, not only during October. So it's wonderful for on World Cancer Day that we get another big shot to be able to talk to people about their breast health. When I joined the campaign in 1995, the world of breast cancer was a completely different world. Evelyn Lauder, who founded the Breast Cancer Research Foundation and the Estee Lauder Breast Cancer Campaign, came to me in the mid-90s. She just started these two campaigns, and she said, Elizabeth, women all over the world are dying of breast cancer and no one is talking about it. So at that time, a great deal of our energies were put into breast cancer awareness. She co-created the pink ribbon in 1992, and since then, the Estee Lauder companies have given away 180 million free pink ribbons over the years to remind people about their breast health. People didn't talk about breast cancer back then. It was sort of whispered about. It was like a dirty, frightening secret that nobody stood up and said, I've had breast cancer. This is how my treatment went. This is how I spoke to my family about it. This is how I reassured my children about what I was going through. People just didn't talk about it. That landscape has changed unbelievably in the 27 years that I've been with the campaign. People now are talking about breast cancer. They're talking about fundraising. They're talking about treatments. They're talking about diagnosis. They're talking about aftercare. if you've been diagnosed, how should people be treated? What can we do to help? It's about education, it's about medical resources, and of course, more than anything, it's about research. And the Estée Lauder Company's breast cancer campaign has raised more than $100 million for breast cancer research and related topics around that. And to us, that is the most important thing. So much has happened in the nearly 30 years since the Breast Cancer Research Foundation was started. We know so much more about breast cancer. Back then, we just talked about breast cancer. Now we know that there are so many different types of breast cancer, and each different type of breast cancer responds to a different level of treatment, a different sort of treatment. In the past, everyone would pretty much have been blasted with the same treatment. That doesn't happen today because we know that some cancers aren't receptive to some treatments, some are. Some respond very well. Some treatments won't make any difference to certain sorts of cancer. All this is new information that's been gleaned through research, which is why still our absolutely primary thing is raising more funds so that one day we live in a breast cancer-free world and women aren't dying.
What are the personal reasons for you to raise awareness and to raise funds for breast cancer?
Well, when Evelyn asked me in 1995 to help her with this campaign, everything she said really resonated because I'd very recently lost my grandmother to breast cancer. And when Evelyn told me about, a whole landscape of women who didn't know really anything about breast cancer, were too frightened to talk about breast cancer, were embarrassed by having breast cancer, this really struck home for me because my grandmother was one of those women. She found a lump herself, like many women do. She was too scared and too embarrassed to tell her doctor for some time, more than a year. And by that time, the cancer had spread. And in spite of a mastectomy, it had spread to her liver, and it was too late to save my grandmother. So part of our messaging has always been early detection saves lives. We know that if breast cancer is caught early, there's an extremely strong chance of survival, but the keywords are catching it early, which is why the emphasis for us has always been on your own breast health, about checking your own breasts regularly, being familiar with your own breasts, checking them once a month so that you know how your breasts feel, so that if you notice a difference, you can go to your doctor and talk to him or her about that. And then if there is something wrong, it'll be found early. And it's a vital message. That message hasn't changed since the campaign first started. You need to be aware of your own breasts. You need to be in tune with them. You need to put your health right up there. Now it is the most diagnosed cancer in the world. It's vital that you look after your own breasts.
Are you worried, Elizabeth, for yourself that you've inherited that gene from your grandmother?
Well, obviously, when anybody related to you has cancer, you are scared there's an inherited gene. In my case, there isn't, but there are for some people. It's I don't know the percentage of people. I don't think it's that large, but yes, certainly I have friends who inherited this gene, and some of them have had preventative treatments for that. I know a girlfriend who carried the gene, who had lost people to breast cancer and ovarian cancer. And after she'd had her 2 kids, she did have an elective mastectomy and hysterectomy. It's a choice that people have. It's obviously a very, very tough choice. And I guess if there is a lot of breast cancer in your family, perhaps it is an option to be tested for the gene. But that's, up to an individual, obviously, and to be discussed with their doctor.
And how regularly do you check your own breasts, and how regularly is the message out there for women?
Well, I check my breasts once a month. Evelyn Lauder, who just put most of her life into this campaign, she made me promise to check my breasts every month and to have a mammogram every year. And in fact, she gave me my first mammogram for my 40th birthday present, and I promised her that I'd have one every year, which I have had. I think it's absolutely vital, and it's really interesting because last year during the pandemic, I couldn't be out on the road like I normally would be during October for the Estée Lauder Company's campaign. So I did a lot on my Instagram and a lot of talking. So I talked to people on my Instagram about checking their own breasts, and it was quite interesting because 2 of my girlfriends saw my Instagram post, hadn't checked their own breasts before, checked their own breasts, and 2 of them found lumps. 2 of them went to the doctor. 2 of them were diagnosed with breast cancer. 2 of them were treated, and 2 of them survived. because they checked their breasts. One was in the bath, one was in the shower. And they just remembered my post, which of course I'd done on behalf of the Estée Lauder companies. So that's two ladies who otherwise wouldn't have known they had a lump. They weren't even old enough to have a mammogram because they were both under 40. Had they not found them themselves, I don't know when they would have been found. And, the prognosis might not have been so good. So this is very healthy messaging we're giving here. And we really hope that people take note of it and start to self-check.
And what is your message to those who are diagnosed with breast cancer? And it's obviously a very frightening diagnosis.
Because of what I do, I've probably talked to thousands of women and some men who've been diagnosed with breast cancer. And it is obviously such a traumatic time for them. And through our research, of course, we've also begun to recognize how traumatic it is also for their loved ones, for their husbands, their parents, and their children. And, every case is different. And I've met such unbelievably brave people. I feel humbled every time I speak to someone who's been diagnosed. In fact, I took part in a podcast, which I actually put on my Instagram a couple of days ago. It's so worthwhile listening to this. It's hosted by Victoria Derbyshire, and there were 3 other breast cancer survivors on the podcast with us. And they just spoke about how it had impacted their life, how it had impacted the life of their loved ones, and how life went on after treatment. And it was just an unbelievably humbling experience to be sitting with these such brave women who were prepared to stand up and tell their story. And they spoke about just the trauma they went through with this diagnosis and with the treatment. But these were good stories because they survived. Interestingly, I think 3 out of the 4 of those women found their lumps themselves, sometimes inadvertently. One lady, I think, was saying that when she was putting her bra on, it just felt a bit annoying on her rib cage. That was a tumor. And I think somebody else was soaping themselves in the shower and went, hello, that doesn't feel right. It's a great podcast. It's definitely worth listening to. Everybody's story is so different, but we can learn a lot from everybody's.
Elizabeth, how do you balance your work as an actress, businesswoman, and all the charitable foundations that you work with?
Well, I think when I was a younger mother with a younger child, the balancing act was a great deal more difficult, as everybody knows who's got young kids who are still being ferried to and from school and still having their baths run for them and having their pajamas laid out. That's a challenge in any woman's life or any parent's life. And, I was always determined the one thing that wasn't going to give was being a mum. So for me, I stepped back from my movie career for a good 7 or 8 years so I could be at home much more. And that's when I started my beachwear. And of course, I continued to work for the Estée Lauder companies in my capacity as a model and a spokesperson and as the global ambassador for breast cancer. And it was a juggling act. But now, my son's 19 and I obviously don't have to lay his pajamas out for him anymore or run his bath. So, I'm enjoying much more now. A real return to business, to making movies. I've been very lucky that during lockdown, since the first lockdown, I've made 3 or 4 movies and a TV pilot, and I've written my first script. And to me, it's actually become a very creatively productive time. And I really think in some way that even though lockdown was such a terrible time for so many of us, in some ways mentally, it was also quite good for some of us because it made us step back, get off the treadmill and reconnect with ourselves, with our families, even though we were cooped up and it was so tough. But we actually did, for me, I had some time to press the pause button and reconnect really with myself, which sounds a bit self-indulgent, but through having my family around me in such close proximity and not leaving the house apart from a few, masked up runs to the supermarket, it was a really interesting experience, and one which actually I don't regret in a way. And I've taken some of that into how I am now anyway. I choose not to go out very much now. I choose to see select people in quite safe environments now, in their houses or in my house. And I'm very happy with that. In fact, I'm thrilled with that. And I feel that I'm actually much closer to certain people. And the people that I haven't seen so much, I don't miss. Sorry.
And just finally, Elizabeth, are you hopeful that one day we will see a cancer-free world?
I truly believe, from the breast cancer point of view, that the only thing standing between today, when women are dying of breast cancer and it's the most diagnosed cancer in the world, and a day where people are no longer dying from breast cancer, the thing standing in the way of that is lack of funding. The more funds we raise, I truly believe we will move much, much swifter to a world, a breast cancer-free world where people aren't dying. We need to raise more money. And in the meantime, people need to look after themselves and self-check and go to their doctor if they're worried.
Elizabeth Hurley, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Tania. Thanks for having me.
For more information on breast cancer, go to the Estee Lauder Company's website.